But many analysts believe demonizing Iran and its nuclear program happens to be such a lucrative business, pointing to the recent deal between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia, with the U.S. selling over $60 billion worth of aircraft to Saudi Arabia.
I don't think it's, well, I think it's true that some people make money off of demonizing Iran, and I object to that. I don't think that's helpful. That's not going to help us solve our problems and get to a better place. But I think those are mostly domestic audiences in the United States, pieces of Congress, various interest groups. The president hasn't demonized Iran, and especially in the months from when he was first elected through the June 12th election, he was very careful in his statements about Iran and continues to be careful, although maybe less so than before, but he really tried to tone down the rhetoric. The arms sales, I don't think that's the U.S. trying to make money. That's the allies, that's their Arab states coming to the U.S. and asking for arms sales. Usually the U.S. isn't out there saying, we want to sell you everything we've got. It's much more often the case that a country that is a friend of the United States comes to the United States and asks for the latest, best equipment because they want it. And so I think that's more of what's happening here. And so why would the U.S. sell weapons to the Arabs? Well, if you're a country in the Middle East, you're an Arab country, and you're worried about Iran, the U.S. doesn't want you to go and start a big nuclear program, and start down this path. So one way you can make countries feel more secure is to sell them arms so that they don't feel as threatened.
Well, this is part of the economic strategy of the U.S. The United States weapons manufacturing business is one of our leading exports in the world, and so we want to sell our weapons around the world. We're the biggest weapons supplier in the world. So the deal with the Saudis is not a new thing. There have been other deals under the Clinton administration also to build big bases in Saudi Arabia and all the rest of it. And it's a kind of a quid pro quo. To the Saudis, we buy your oil, so you buy our weapons. And that's a kind of petro-recycling. That used to happen with the Shah of Iran. The Shah would buy American weapons because he sold America. It was expected because America bought, oil from Iran. So this is part of what they do. The problem is for the Saudis, their big threat seems to be internal, domestic, not external. And, Saudi Arabia is hardly a democracy, is hardly a country that lives up to any kind of international ideals and American ideals. And so this is kind of a way to try to create more jobs in the United States or keep more jobs in the United States, to sell these planes and other weapon systems to Saudi Arabia. But it does feed an arms race, and other countries now will find the need to arm themselves, and on and on and on and on. And it's a very negative thing in terms of trying to create a stable and peaceful world.
Remember Barack Obama's nuclear weapons-free world? Well, the president has soon found himself in an awkward position of trying to prove just that.
Well, I wouldn't have a scorecard that judged President Obama's record on nuclear weapons and have that scorecard only have one item on whether he supports a non-binding resolution. That would be pretty far down my list of ways to judge the authenticity of his commitment. It seems to me that the best way to judge his commitment would be, is he reducing the U.S. stockpile of nuclear weapons, and is he joining international treaties, not non-binding resolutions, but international treaties that would further constrain nuclear weapons. And on both those most important measures, he has followed through.
Well, first of all, there have been a lot of resolutions passed by the U.S., calling on Israel to do one thing or another. Most of them have been rejected, have been ineffectual, have not led to anything positive. Israel just says, look, we're being picked on, we're being attacked, unfairly, et cetera, and so forth. And they've just basically have refused, to comply. And there are many broken resolutions. And I guess, the idea of putting forth a resolution in a body which doesn't have the power to enforce a resolution is just sort of more word games.
The so-called 5+1 group of nations will get together next week in New York on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly meeting there, simply to talk about Iran's nuclear program and not Israel's nuclear weapons arsenal. The question now is, what's next?
Well, I think the only way this gets resolved is through negotiation. And so I'm happy that the P5-1 is meeting, President Ahmadinejad announced back in the summer that Iran would return to those talks. So we'll see if they send a delegation. You can't negotiate unless the parties show up at the meeting. And right now, Iran is not showing up at the meeting. And they haven't showed up in the meeting for almost a year now. So I'm hoping they will show up to the meeting and that these discussions will be productive and that we can build a little confidence, build a little momentum, and then deal with the tough issues and find a way to resolve this. I remain optimistic that if the parties are sincerely interested in a negotiated deal, we can do that. We can find a way so that Iran preserves its right to a peaceful nuclear program and the international community is able to feel secure about how that program is going to be used. I think we can do this, but we can't do it unless people show up to the meetings.
Well, you know, at this point we are only 2 years away from the next U.S. presidential elections. And that's not a long time. And also this fall, this November, there's going to be midterm congressional elections in the U.S. And U.S. foreign policy, including policy towards Iran, is always very much influenced by electioneering, election politics in the United States, domestic policy. And I think that's really the most determining factor. Everything that happens between now and then is geared towards looking tough on Iran, quote unquote. If Obama, who's a Democrat, really emphasizes the carrot approach as opposed to this big stick approach, so to speak, with Iran, he and the Democratic Party will be attacked and belittled by the Republicans for not being tough on terrorism, which, you know, with Iran being a member of Axis of Evil and so forth. So I expect that increasingly the United States is going to act with belligerence towards Iran because of the domestic politics and the approaching elections.
Well, thank you for watching. Always watch out for the fine print. Right here in Press TV with me, Amir Arafat.